Welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Taylor and today we're doing my June reading wrap up. But before I start the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you love all things books. So I ended up reading 7 books in the month of June, and so far that's been my best reading month, not just in quantity, but also in quality, because I had 3 5-star reads. I almost had 4, but we'll get to that one when I talk about it. But in terms of my reading stats for the month, I ended up finishing 2 books that I picked from my TBR this past month. I did go down a mood reading path this month, and I'm not mad about it because I found some great reads there. I ended up reading 1 fantasy, 4 romances, 1 nonfiction, and 1 horror novel. Then I read mostly on Kindle with 2 physical books, 5 Kindle books. I read 4 YA, 3 adult, and then I only read 1 book that had any sort of like spice in it. And 6 out of the 7 books I read were queer. No books were below 4 stars. So again, great reading month. And I guess we'll have to see how I stick to my TBR next month, but I guess without further ado, let's go through all the books I read in June. Starting out with the book that I started in May and finished in June, The Poppy War took me a hot second to finish. If you've heard anything about R.F. Kuang and The Poppy War, you'll know that this is some heavy stuff to get through. There's a lot of trigger warnings in here, particularly for SA and war and violence and all of that, so do keep that in mind when you read it. But of course I ended up giving this 5 stars for my first R.F. Kuang book. It was a great venture. So in terms of describing this book, it's kind of hard to describe, but in my best terms, you're following Rin, who is a war orphan who tests her way into the greatest military academy in Nicara, if I'm remembering correctly, at Sinigard. And when she arrives, she realizes she's kind of the outcast because she's poor, she's of a different race, she speaks a different language for the most part to the Nicaran people who are there. But while she's there, she discovers a lot about herself and the culture that she grew up in, particularly surrounding the gods and lore and all of that. And of course, during this book, they end up going to war, and a lot of hard decisions are made throughout that process. I'm just going to say Rin. She is an interesting character to get into because she doesn't necessarily make the best decisions, and she does tend to act on impulse, but we are following her through most of her like mid to late teens throughout this story and sort of seeing what it's like to be thrust into a war, especially with a war of ideologies and a war of people. I mean, obviously this is based off of real life. It is historical, and R.F. Kuang really does focus a lot on the importance of education and academia while also painting the horrors and the hard decisions that need to be made during times of war. So these characters are definitely interesting. I know a lot of people talk about romance in relation to this book and whether or not it is. I would not classify this as a romance. There may be very, very tiny hints at possible romance in the future, but that really is not the point of this book. So do not go into this book or this series seeking out romance. And this was the only non-queer book I read this month in June. Although, I mean, I'm kind of getting hints that some of the characters might be queer, but I'm holding out to see what we get in the Dragon Republic. Up next is Twelfth Knight by Lexine Farrell Fallmuth, another 5-star read from the month. So if you don't know anything, Olivia Blake, who writes some very famous, like, popular adult fantasies, this is her real name. Olivia Blake is her pen name, and she uses her real name to write her YA romances under. At least I haven't seen her publish a YA fantasy, so who knows. But this book is following Viola Reyes, who is a nerdy, very much so tomboy high school girl who's kind of struggling with a lot of like toxic masculinity around her, particularly struggling with the fact that her co-counsel or president of the school to her VP, Jack Orsino, doesn't seem to like to help out much, and she's kind of carrying the weight of operations. But when Jack injures himself and enters the online game Twelfth Knight, he encounters an online character that is V's character, only she's playing as a man, and they start to communicate, and V is unwilling to come out as, you know, herself to Jack. And of course, romance ensues from there. There is a little queer storyline in here that I did call. So this is very much so more queer, like, side character plotline. But I did really like this book in terms of like a YA romance because it really delves into that coming of age aspect and sort of the pressures put on teenage girls and girls in general, as well as you kind of have B questioning her sexuality towards the end, and this romance was just well developed. I will say, if you're not a fan of the not like other girls situation, I did get some of that vibe from here, although I feel like it doesn't quite fall into the traps of that early 2000s not like other girls plotline. But do read with caution. There's no spice in this. Then we're delving into the books that I read for my queer reading vlog, which was the last video, not last, second to last video you saw situation. I'm not sure when that came out, but I'll link it somewhere on the screen. Firebird by Sun Mi. This is a queer graphic novel following Caroline and Kim. Caroline is a sophomore that is tutoring Kim, who's sort of struggling with life right now and the weight of having to take care of everyone around her. While Caroline is also struggling with family issues and gender and body dysmorphia all coming in at once, and neither of them are out to their families about being queer, you know? But while they get to know each other, they start to fall in love, and it sort of culminates in an open-ended where do they go from here, but there is a cute little romance that ensues. I don't give this book 4 stars, 0 chili spice. I thought it was good. I don't know if the art style is necessarily mine. I think I like a little more color to my art. It is a very much so dark black and red style, and I like my endings a little more finite. But hey, if you like an open ending and you're looking for a good, more dramatic sapphic romance, this one might be for you. Then I read another short graphic novel comic strip, Little Things LGBTQ+ by Lux Amaretti. This is just a queer, like, non-fiction comic strip that goes through the various queer identities that are depicted in LGBTQIA+. It's less than 100 pages. I thought it was pretty good, very quick read. So if you're just needing to explain something about queer identities to people, or you're just like wanting to brush up, this one is a quick read. I don't really rate nonfiction, but hey, if you're looking for something cute, this one's it. Plus, there's cute little graphic, like, comic strips that spin off of this if you're interested in any of the characters or identities presented. Then we have Squad by Maggie Takuta Hall and illustrated by Lisa Sterrell. Now, I did read Maggie Takuta Hall's book, The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, last year. I didn't necessarily love that one, but this graphic novel is very, very good. This was my only, like, horror that I read this month, and while it is described as horror, it definitely is more of a, like, romance fantasy situation. Either way, so some of this may be spoilers, although I think you can tell by the cover and the description on the back that we are following Becca, who is the new girl in school, and she gets recruited by the squad in the school, the mean girls, the popular girls. And one night when the popular girls invite her out, she finds out that they want to initiate her into their pack, aka the werewolf pack, where, you know, they get to have all of these amazing powers, and the only downside is they must eat someone once every full moon, and that someone tends to be guys that are kind of disgusting. And of course, a little sapphic romance ensues from there. The sapphic romance does take more place towards the end, and there is a little fade to black situation going on if you're looking for that one. But I really found this one interesting. They be splattering blood every chapter. Like, every chapter had, like, page is covered in blood. So if you're looking for something for, like, spooky season, you know, with a very much so, like, pop art, like, graphic style, very colorful, this one might be for you. I ended up giving it 4.75 stars, and obviously I said it was fade to black. On to a book that surprised me in its 5-star rating, also in the fact that I wanted to, you know, scream, laugh, cry, throw it across the room. Although I did buy this physical copy, I was reading on my phone, so yeah, almost did throw my phone across the room. Northranger by Ray Terciero and illustrated by Brie Indigo. This is following Mexican teenager Cade Muniz, who is growing up in rural Texas, and his stepfather is recruited to work on a friend's former military buddy's ranch for the summer. So Cade has to come along, and while he is there, not only is he stuck with dealing with a lot of racism and homophobia around him, not being out, he's also following for the owner's son. And there's a lot of dramatics going on here. There's a little mystery surrounding the death of the owner's wife, and you know what? Cade is really into horror movies, and he kind of, you know, makes his life out to seem like one. Do check trigger warnings for this one, because one I'm talking about, I mentioned, and he does mention in the intro that there's a lot of, like, language in here that a lot of people may not like, but it is true to the experience of him growing up Mexican and queer in rural Texas. And obviously there's a lot of talk about mental health and, you know, struggling, like loss of loved ones. The ending, the ending, the ending was where I started to tear up, and then also was like, I want to hit someone, but I also want to throw this across the room. So do keep that in mind. There is no spice in this one, but if you're looking for another dramatic queer novel that is, in this case, gay men versus Firebird, which was sapphics, this one might be for you. Then I finally did it, y'all. If you've been on this channel for the last year, you would know that I have been putting New Adult by Timothy Janofsky off for a very long time, mainly for the fact that it never failed. Every time I have tried to pick this book up, it's not caused a reading slump, but it has been picked up while I was in the midst of a reading slump, and I don't know why. I kept trying to pick it up during those. But after having gotten past the first 2 chapters this time, I actually really like this book. 4.75 stars and 1 chili spice. There are a couple like short spicy scenes in here if you are looking for that. So as the title implies, this is a new adult queer romance following Nolan Baker, who's living with his best friend in New York and trying to get his dreams of being a comedian off the ground. But when one night of professional fame goes really well and social life kind of gets destroyed, he wishes on some crystals that blast him 7 years in the future to the age of 30, where again his career has taken off, but his social life has taken a severe dive, and he has to sit there and determine what he can do to improve his relationships going on and going forth. This is a Friends to Lovers 13 going on 30 queer retelling. I am giving this book 4.75 stars, if I haven't already said that. If I have, then that'll be cut out. Yeah, this one was really good. It did have me tearing up. The only reason I didn't get bumped up to a 5-star is because since it took me so long to get into the concept of the story, which is mostly a me problem, because stories involving time travel I don't love. I keep getting thrown back to Endgame. Even though I love Endgame, I still every time get hung up on the time travel aspects and all of like the inconsistencies that pop up in my brain. But hey, I ended up enjoying this one. Our love was inevitable. Nolan, you got me with that line. You did get me with that line. It ended up being very heartwarming and swoony towards the end. It does deal with a lot of heavy topics, you know, obviously, because when he hits 30 and he comes to life, comes back into that 30-year-old body, he's like, what the hell went on in my life? Because a lot of things went down. So if you're dealing with messy family dynamics and you're looking for a very heartwarming queer story, this one might be for you. And I only have a couple Timothy Janofsky books left to read, and I'm savoring every one of them. But that was every book that I finished in the month of June. I've already picked my July TBR, and it's looking stacked. Will I be doing more mood reading in the month of July, or will I stick to my TBR? Who knows? But let me know what you read in the month of June. Were there any great queer reads that you're excited to tell people about? And I will see y'all in the next video.